Thank you, Daddy. Little girl calls 911 to give thanks for food, but what happens changes everything. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The flickering fluorescent light in apartment 2B cast harsh shadows across Sarah Chen's tired face as she stared into the nearly empty refrigerator. The ancient appliance hummed and wheezed, struggling to keep cool the meager contents within. 3-day-old leftover rice in a cracked plastic container, a wilted carrot that had seen better days, and half a container of milk that would expire tomorrow. That was dinner for 4 people. The harsh reality of their situation hit her anew every evening at this exact moment. Standing in the narrow galley kitchen of their rundown apartment, Sarah felt the weight of her failures pressing down like a physical burden. The linoleum floor beneath her feet was worn through in places, showing the concrete underneath. The cabinets, painted a cheerful yellow by some long-ago tenant, now showed chips and water stains that no amount of scrubbing could remove. "Mommy, I'm hungry," whispered 6-year-old Maya, tugging at Sarah's worn scrubs. The pale blue fabric had been washed so many times it felt more like tissue paper than cotton. Behind Maya, 4-year-old twins Zoe and Chloe clung to each other, their dark eyes wide with the kind of patience only children who've learned to wait for food possess. The twins were so small for their age, a constant reminder of their premature birth and the medical complications that had drained Sarah's savings and destroyed her credit. Zoe, always the more vocal of the two, pressed her thumb to her mouth while Chloe simply leaned against her sister, both of them understanding somehow that this was not the time for demands or complaints. Sarah's heart shattered a little more with each passing second. Working double shifts at Sunset Manor nursing home barely covered rent, utilities, and the most basic necessities. The medical bills from the twins' premature birth 7 years ago still haunted their credit like malevolent ghosts, making every month a careful dance between survival and complete collapse. She'd become an expert at juggling payment dates, knowing exactly how long she could stretch each bill before the threat started coming. The apartment itself told their story in every corner. Hand-me-down furniture arranged to hide the worst stains on the carpet. Windows that didn't quite close properly, letting in drafts that made the heating bill a constant source of anxiety. A bathroom door that stuck unless you knew exactly how to jiggle the handle. But Sarah had made it as warm and loving as possible, hanging the girls' artwork on every available wall space, creating reading corners with pillows and blankets, transforming their small space into something that felt like home despite its shortcomings. "I know, sweetheart. Mommy's making something special," Sarah lied, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest like a living thing. She reached for the rice container, calculating portions in her head with the precision of someone who had been doing this mathematics of survival for years. If she gave the girls most of it, she could survive on the sleeve of saltine crackers hidden behind the cleaning supplies until her paycheck arrived Thursday. Maya pressed her small face against Sarah's hip, and Sarah could feel the prominent outline of her daughter's ribs through her thin t-shirt. The shirt itself was one of 3 Maya owned, all of them purchased from the discount bin at the thrift store downtown. "It's okay, Mommy. I'm not that hungry anyway." The 6-year-old's attempt to comfort her mother broke something fundamental inside Sarah's chest. Maya had started doing this lately, pretending she wasn't hungry, insisting she was full after just a few bites, quietly sliding portions of her food toward her younger sisters when she thought no one was looking. At 6 years old, Maya had somehow appointed herself the family's protector, carrying a burden no child should ever have to bear. Sarah remembered being 6 herself, worried about nothing more complex than whether her favorite cartoon would be on television or if it would rain during recess. Maya worried about whether there would be enough food, whether they could afford to keep the lights on, whether Mommy was too tired after work to read bedtime stories. The injustice of it made Sarah's hands shake as she measured rice into their one good pot. "Girls, go wash your hands in the bathroom. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes, Sarah managed, forcing brightness into her voice that she certainly didn't feel. "And remember to use just a little soap. We need to make it last." As the 3 children scampered toward the tiny bathroom they all shared, Sarah could hear their chatter echoing off the thin walls. Zoe was telling Chloe about a butterfly she'd seen in the courtyard. her 4-year-old vocabulary struggling with descriptions of colors and patterns. Maya was explaining the proper way to wash hands, her tone unconsciously mimicking the patient way Sarah spoke to them. Alone in the kitchen, Sarah leaned against the chipped counter and closed her eyes. The weight of exhaustion settled into her bones like an old friend. She'd been up since 4 that morning, catching the first bus to Sunset Manor, where she spent 12 hours feeding, bathing, and caring for elderly residents who reminded her daily of her own mother, gone now for 3 years. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent her days ensuring other people's families were well cared for, while struggling to provide basic necessities for her own children. 3 beautiful daughters who deserved the world, and she could barely give them one decent meal a day. The twins needed new shoes. Their current pairs had holes that Sarah had tried to patch with duct tape and cardboard. Maya's winter coat was 2 sizes too small, but winter coats cost money they simply didn't have. Every night Sarah lay awake making lists of everything her children needed, calculating costs against her meager income, always coming up short. She was measuring rice with the careful precision of someone who understood that wasting even a grain could mean the difference between a meal and going hungry when the knock came. Soft, almost hesitant, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. Sarah frowned, pausing with the measuring cup halfway to the pot. They weren't expecting anyone. Their social circle had shrunk to almost nothing over the years as Sarah's energy and resources had been consumed by simple survival. The few friends she'd maintained from her previous life knew better than to drop by unannounced during these lean weeks right before payday, when every dollar had already been allocated to survival. Through the peephole, she saw an empty hallway. The overhead light flickered in its familiar pattern. 2 bright flashes, then dimness, then bright again. Mrs. Patterson from 2C had complained to the landlord about it months ago, but maintenance requests in their building moved at the speed of geological time. But when Sarah opened the door, there it was. A single red apple sitting precisely in the center of a small piece of paper. No one in sight, just the echo of footsteps disappearing down the concrete stairwell that smelled perpetually of cleaning solution and other people's cooking. Sarah looked left and right down the hallway, but it was empty except for the usual sounds of the building. Television sets playing through thin walls, a baby crying somewhere on the 3rd floor, the rumble of the ancient elevator making its slow journey between floors. Whoever had left this gift had vanished completely. She picked up the apple, noting its perfect shine, the way it seemed to glow under the dim hallway light like something from a fairy tale. This wasn't the kind of apple you bought at the discount grocery store where Sarah did her shopping. This was the kind of apple that came from the expensive organic section, the kind that cost more per pound than Sarah typically spent on produce for an entire week. The paper beneath contained a phone number written in careful block letters, 911, and a simple phrase that made Sarah's breath catch. For when you need to say thank you. Strange didn't begin to cover it. Who left expensive gifts with instructions to call emergency services? Sarah turned the apple over in her hands, checking for bruises or imperfections or any clue about who might have left it. It was flawless, the kind of perfect fruit she hadn't been able to afford in months, maybe years. A memory flickered. Her grandmother's stories about neighbors helping neighbors during the Depression, leaving food on doorsteps with no expectation of recognition or reward. But this was different somehow. This felt deliberate, purposeful, like someone knew exactly how much even a single perfect apple would mean to her family. Mommy? Who was at the door? Maya appeared beside her like a small ghost, her dark hair still damp from washing her hands. She looked up at Sarah with curious eyes that held too much understanding for a 6-year-old. I don't know, baby. Someone left this for us. Sarah held up the apple, watching Maya's face transform with wonder. It's the prettiest apple ever. It looks like the ones in the picture books at the library. Maya reached out one small finger to touch the perfect red surface. Can we eat it? Can we really eat something so pretty? Sarah looked at the apple, then at the mysterious note, then at her daughter's hopeful expression. 1 apple for 3 hungry children wasn't much in practical terms, but Maya's joy made it feel like a feast prepared by angels. Of course we can eat it, sweetheart. But first, what do you think this note means? Sarah showed Maya the paper, pointing to the careful handwriting. Maya studied it with the serious concentration she applied to all important matters. Her small brow furrowed in thought. She was learning to read, and Sarah could see her lips moving silently as she sounded out the words. It says to call and say thank you. We should call them. Maya's voice rose with excitement. Mama always says we should say thank you when someone is nice to us. Someone was really, really nice to give us such a beautiful apple. But sweetheart, that's 911. That's the number for emergencies, for when people are hurt or in danger. Maya's brow furrowed deeper, her logical 6-year-old mind working through this puzzle. But someone was nice to us. That's good, not an emergency. Maybe they want us to call because... She paused, thinking hard, her expression so serious it made Sarah's heart ache. Because saying thank you is really important? Maybe it's an emergency to say thank you. Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion. Her 6-year-old daughter, who had learned to ration her own food to help her sisters, who pretended not to be hungry so others could eat more, who understood far too much about the adult world of scarcity and struggle, wanted to call a stranger just to express gratitude. Or maybe, Maya continued, her voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a great secret. Maybe whoever left the apple knew we don't have a phone book or know any numbers, but everyone knows 911. Maybe they picked that number because they knew we would remember it. The simple wisdom of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. Maya was right. They didn't have a landline, just Sarah's ancient cell phone with a pay-as-you-go plan that barely covered work emergencies. They didn't have internet to look up numbers, but everyone, even a 6-year-old, knew 911. Maybe we should call, Mommy. It would be polite, Maya said, her small hand slipping into Sarah's. Grandma Chen always said that good manners don't cost anything, but they're worth everything. Something in Maya's earnest expression, combined with the memory of Sarah's mother's voice speaking those exact words, made the decision for her. What harm could it really do? A quick thank you call, then they'd share the apple and have their simple dinner. Maybe it would even bring Maya some joy in a day that had offered precious little. Okay, baby, you can make the call. But just to say thank you, and then we hang up right away. Maya clapped her hands together, her whole face radiating the kind of pure excitement that made Sarah remember why she fought so hard every day. This was why, for moments like this, when despite everything, her children could still find wonder in the world. Sarah dialed the number with fingers that trembled slightly, her heart racing inexplicably as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe no one would answer. Maybe this was all some elaborate mistake or prank. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was warm, professional, with the kind of calm authority that came from years of handling crisis situations. Sarah almost hung up immediately, suddenly realizing how ridiculous this must seem. But Maya was already reaching for the phone, her small voice clear and determined. Hi. This isn't an emergency, but someone left us an apple and there was a note that said to call this number and say thank you. So, thank you. The apple is really, really pretty, and we're going to share it for dinner because Mommy works really hard at the place where the old people live, but sometimes there isn't very much food, and this apple is like a present from heaven and... Maya. Sarah reached for the phone, mortified by her daughter's innocent revelation of their circumstances, but something in the officer's voice made her pause. Wait, please don't hang up. Can you tell me your name, sweetheart? There was something different in his tone now. Alert, focused almost. Expectant, like he'd been waiting for exactly this call. Officer Brandon Mills sat up straighter in his chair at the downtown precinct, his pen frozen above the incident report he'd been mechanically filling out for the past hour. The familiar sounds of the station continued around him, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the constant chatter of police radio. But suddenly it all faded into background noise. 3 days ago, he'd received the strangest briefing of his 15-year career in law enforcement. It had been a quiet Thursday afternoon when CEO Marcus Thompson, one of the city's most prominent businessmen, had walked through the precinct doors like he owned the place, which, considering his net worth and political connections, he practically did. Brandon had recognized him immediately from newspaper photos and television interviews. Marcus Thompson, heir to the Thompson Industries fortune, the man whose family name graced half the buildings in the financial district, 40 years old, impeccably dressed, carrying himself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. "I'm going to be helping some families in need," Marcus had explained, his expensive Italian suit looking wildly out of place against the stark institutional walls of the police station. Anonymous gifts, food, necessities, small things that might make a difference. Some of these families might call to say thank you. If they do, I need you to take down their information and call me immediately. Brandon had found it odd, but then again, rich people often had strange ways of being charitable. Probably some elaborate tax write-off scheme, or maybe a way to generate positive publicity without seeming too obvious about it. The wealthy were always coming up with new ways to make themselves look generous while maintaining their distance from the actual problems they claimed to care about. He'd agreed to help, thinking it was probably harmless and might actually do some good, even if the motivations were questionable. Marcus had left his private number, emphasizing that Brandon should call the moment anyone contacted 911 about a gift, or to say thank you for food. Any call, day or night. Marcus had insisted, his hands trembling slightly as he wrote down the number. "This is more important than you can possibly understand." Now listening to the sweet, earnest voice of a 6-year-old thanking a stranger for a single apple, Brandon understood there was something much deeper happening here. The child's innocent words painted a picture of poverty that made his chest ache. A working mother, not enough food, an apple being treated like a precious gift. "My name is Maya," the little girl continued, her voice filled with the kind of genuine joy that made Brandon want to reach through the phone and protect her from every hardship the world might throw her way. "And these are my sisters Zoe and Chloe. They're twins and they're 4 years old and they're really, really good at sharing even when there's not very much to share. We live with Mommy and she works really hard at the place where old people live because she's really good at taking care of people, but sometimes we don't have very much food, but that's okay because we have each other and now we have this beautiful apple and—" "Maya, honey, let me talk to your mommy for just a second," Brandon interrupted gently, his professional training kicking in even as his heart broke at the child's innocent revelation of their circumstances. He'd handled hundreds of these calls over the years. Domestic disturbances, welfare checks, emergency situations involving children. But this was different. This felt personal in a way that made his hands shake. There was a shuffling sound, muffled voices in the background. Then a woman's voice came on the line, strained and embarrassed. "I'm so sorry, officer. My daughter didn't understand what she was doing. We shouldn't have called this number. Please don't report this or think we're trying to abuse the system. We're not asking for help or trying to—" "Ma'am, please don't apologize. There's no trouble here. Can you tell me your name?" The woman's voice was educated, articulate, with just a hint of an accent that suggested English might not have been her first language. Despite the obvious stress in her tone, there was something warm and genuine about her that came through even over the phone. Sarah Chen. "Look, we're fine, we really are. Look, we don't need assistance or intervention. This was just a misunderstanding about a gift someone left at our door. My daughter thought she should call and say thank you because that's what we've taught her about good manners, but she didn't realize this was an emergency number. Mrs. Chen, I need you to stay on the line and I need your address." Brandon could hear the panic creeping into her voice now, the fear that every struggling parent carried about losing their children to the system. "Are we in trouble? We didn't do anything wrong. Maya just wanted to say thank you. We're managing fine, we don't need social services or—" "You're not in trouble, Mrs. Chen. But someone very important has been waiting for exactly this call." As Sarah reluctantly gave him their address, 412 Maple Street, apartment 2B, Brandon was already reaching for his radio with his free hand. This was it. This was the call Marcus Thompson had been expecting. But how had the CEO known this specific family would call? And why was a billionaire businessman leaving single apples for struggling families he'd never met? The moment Brandon hung up, he dialed Marcus's private number. The phone rang exactly once before Marcus answered, as if he'd been sitting with his hand on the receiver. "Brandon, did someone call?" "Yes, sir. A family named Chen. Sarah Chen and her 3 daughters. They received an apple with a note telling them to call and say thank you." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Brandon wondered if the call had been dropped. Finally, Marcus spoke. his voice barely above a whisper. What was the mother's name again? Sarah Chen, sir. They live at 412 Maple Street. Sir, do you know this family? Another long pause, then a sound that might have been a sob. I need to see them. Can you meet me there? Please, Brandon. This is more important than you know. 20 minutes later, Brandon pulled up outside the weathered apartment building where Sarah Chen lived with her 3 daughters. The building had seen better decades, probably built in the 1960s as affordable housing. It now showed the inevitable signs of deferred maintenance and overcrowding. Paint peeling from window frames, a front door that didn't quite close properly, cracked concrete steps leading to a small lobby that smelled of cleaning products and other people's cooking. But someone had made an effort to maintain dignity here. The small patch of grass in front was neatly trimmed, and someone had planted flowers in old coffee cans along the walkway. Children's chalk drawings decorated the sidewalk, and a handmade sign in the lobby reminded residents about community movie night in the basement recreation room. Marcus Thompson was already there, pacing back and forth in front of the building like a caged animal. The usually composed businessman looked like he'd seen a ghost. His expensive coat was wrinkled, his normally perfect hair disheveled, and his hands shook as he checked his phone for what must have been the 20th time in the 5 minutes since Brandon had arrived. Sir, are you ready to go up? Brandon approached cautiously, noting the way Marcus seemed to be fighting some internal battle. Marcus turned, and Brandon was shocked to see tears in the man's eyes. Real tears, not the crocodile tears of politicians, or the strategic emotion of corporate leaders trying to seem human. These were the tears of someone confronting something too large and painful to process. I don't know if I can do this, Marcus said, his voice cracking. What if I'm wrong? What if it's not? What if she won't even let me explain? Not what, sir, what's really going on here? Marcus took a shuddering breath, staring up at the building as if it held the answers to every question he'd ever asked. 7 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I lost someone. I lost everything that mattered. I've been searching for her ever since, trying to make amends, trying to find a way back to what we had. And now, hearing that name, that voice on the phone. His voice trailed off, but Brandon was beginning to understand. This wasn't about charity or tax write-offs. This was personal. This was about love and loss and the kind of regret that could eat a person alive. What if she hates me? Marcus continued, his successful businessman facade crumbling completely. What if she won't even listen? What if I've lost my chance forever? Before Brandon could respond, they heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs inside the building. Through the glass door, they could see a small figure bounding down the steps, with the endless energy that only young children possessed. Maya burst through the door like a small tornado, her dark hair flying behind her, her face lighting up when she saw Brandon's uniform. Despite the obvious poverty of her circumstances, she radiated the kind of joy and confidence that spoke to good parenting and unconditional love. Are you the thank you police officer? Did you come to see our apple? Mommy said we might get in trouble for calling, but I told her that saying thank you is never wrong. Behind her, Sarah appeared, moving more slowly, carrying one twin while the other held tightly to her free hand. She was younger than Brandon had expected, probably mid-30s, with the kind of understated beauty that poverty and exhaustion couldn't quite hide. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore scrubs that had been washed so many times they'd lost most of their color. She stopped short when she saw Marcus, her face going pale as if she'd seen a ghost. The twin in her arms, Zoe or Chloe, Brandon couldn't tell which, looked curiously between the adults, sensing tension she was too young to understand. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus stepped forward, his expensive shoes crunching on the children's chalk drawings, his voice shaking with 7 years of accumulated regret and longing. Hello, Sarah. The apple that Maya had been proudly holding slipped from her small hands, rolling across the sidewalk as the two adults stared at each other across a chasm of time and pain and words that had never been spoken. The apple came to rest against the curb, its perfect red surface now marred by a small brown spot where it had struck the concrete. Maya started to chase after it, her instinctive care for their precious gift overriding everything else. But something in the way her mother had gone completely still made her stop. The air itself seemed to have changed, charged with an electricity that even a 6-year-old could feel. Maya looked between her mother and the well-dressed stranger, her young mind trying to process the sudden shift in atmosphere. She'd never seen her mother look like this, pale and frozen, as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. "Mommy, do you know the man?" Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the face she'd tried so hard to forget over the past 7 years. Marcus looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, silver threading through his dark hair, a weariness in his posture that spoke of sleepless nights and accumulated regret. But he was exactly the same man who had walked out of her life when she needed him most. The same man who had chosen his family's expectations and his inheritance over their love. The same man who had left her pregnant and alone to face a world that had no sympathy for single mothers struggling to survive. The memories crashed over her like a tsunami. Late nights studying together in medical school, Marcus helping her through organic chemistry while she helped him understand anatomy. Stolen weekends in his apartment, dreaming about their future together. The night she'd told him she was pregnant. The joy in his eyes that had lasted exactly 12 hours before his father's ultimatum arrived. Choose the family business and the trust fund, or choose Sarah and lose everything. He'd chosen the money. He'd always chosen the money. Sarah. Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's, 7 years of practiced composure crumbling in an instant. "I've been looking for you, for so long." "Looking for me?" The words came out as a whisper, then louder as anger began to flood through the shock. "Looking for me? You had my number, Marcus. You knew where I worked. You knew where I lived. You chose not to find me." Brandon stepped back instinctively, recognizing the intimate nature of whatever was unfolding. This wasn't just about charitable apple deliveries. This was about broken hearts and abandoned promises, and the kind of pain that left scars on people's souls. Zoe and Chloe pressed closer to their mother, their 4-year-old instincts picking up on the tension even if they didn't understand its source. Chloe, always the more sensitive of the twins, began to suck her thumb, while Zoe wrapped her small arms around Sarah's legs. But Maya, with the curious fearlessness that had always defined her personality, stepped toward Marcus. She studied his face with the same serious concentration she applied to difficult homework problems, as if she were trying to solve some complex equation written in his features. "Are you the one who gave us the apple? You look sad." "Mommy, why does the apple man look sad?" Marcus knelt to Maya's eye level, his hands trembling as if he were approaching something sacred and fragile. Up close, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark hair, though Maya's was longer and often tangled from play. The same intelligent dark eyes, though Maya's held joy where Marcus's held regret. The same determined set to her jaw that Marcus saw in the mirror every morning. The stubborn chin that had belonged to his grandmother and apparently had been passed down through the generations. But it was more than just physical resemblance. There was something in Maya's posture, in the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, in the way she unconsciously mimicked his expression as she studied him. It was like looking at a younger, happier version of himself. "What's your birthday, sweetheart?" he asked softly, though he was fairly certain he already knew the answer. "March 15th. I just turned 6. Mommy made me a cake with candles and everything, and we sang the birthday song, and I got to make a wish." Maya's face lit up with the memory. "I wished for something really good to happen to our family. Maybe you're part of my wish coming true." Marcus closed his eyes, the date hitting him like a physical blow. March 15th. Exactly 9 months after the last night he and Sarah had spent together. The night before his father's ultimatum. Before the board meeting that had changed everything. Before he'd made the choice that had destroyed the only real love he'd ever known. When he opened his eyes, Maya was still watching him with that intense, curious stare. "You have the same eyes as me," she said matter-of-factly. "And the same chin. My friend Jessica says I have a strong chin, but she says it like it's a good thing. Do you think having a strong chin is good?" "Yes," Marcus managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I think it's very good. It means you're strong inside too." "Marcus, don't." Sarah's voice was sharp with warning, with 7 years of protective instincts kicking in. "Don't you dare. She's mine, isn't she?" Marcus stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. The certainty of it settled into his bones like truth finally acknowledged. Our daughter. The words hung in the air like something alive and dangerous. Maya looked between the adults, confusion clouding her features. She understood that something important was happening, something that involved her, but the specifics were beyond her 6-year-old comprehension. What does he mean, Mommy? What's our daughter? Am I somebody's daughter who isn't you? Sarah pulled Maya closer, her protective instincts overriding everything else. The shock, the anger, the part of her heart that had never stopped loving Marcus despite everything he'd done. Maya, take your sisters upstairs. Right now. But Mommy, I want to understand. Now, Maya, please. Take Zoe and Chloe upstairs and turn on the television. Find cartoons for them to watch. Something in Sarah's tone, a note of desperation that Maya had learned to recognize during their most difficult times, made her obey without further protest. She took Zoe and Chloe's hands and led them toward the building entrance, but Brandon could see her looking back over her shoulder, her intelligent eyes trying to piece together the puzzle of adult emotions and half-understood words. When the children were safely inside, Sarah turned to Marcus with fury blazing in her eyes. 7 years of struggle, of working double shifts while her body ached with exhaustion, of choosing between medicine for herself and food for her children, of lying awake at night wondering how she was going to make ends meet. All of it crystallized into rage. How dare you come here? How dare you leave that apple for them knowing they'd call? What kind of sick game is this? Did you think it would be fun to play with a child's emotions? To disrupt our lives when we've finally found some stability? It's not a game, Sarah. I swear to you, it's not a game. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar to Sarah, who had seen him do it 1,000 times when they were young and in love, and thought the world held nothing but possibilities. I've been trying to find you for 3 years. Ever since I finally grew up enough to understand what I'd lost. Ever since my father died and I realized that the company, the board expectations, the trust fund, none of it mattered anymore without you. 3 years? Sarah's voice rose with incredulity. 3 years? Marcus, it's been 7 years. 7 years since you walked away without a word. Since you chose your family's money over our family. Since you left me pregnant and alone and scared out of my mind. I tried to find you before that. I tried to call you back, to explain what happened with my father. But by the time I fought my way free of his control, you'd moved. You'd changed jobs. It was like you'd vanished from the earth. Because I couldn't afford the old apartment after you left. Because I was pregnant and alone and scared, and your family made it very clear that I wasn't welcome in your world. Your mother actually called me, Marcus. She told me that if I really loved you, I'd disappear and let you live the life you were meant to live. Marcus's face went white. My mother called you. I didn't know. Sarah, I swear I didn't know she'd done that. Of course you didn't know. You never asked. You just accepted their version of events and moved on with your privileged life, while I figured out how to survive as a single mother with no family and no money, and medical bills that never seemed to stop coming. The medical bills. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. The twins were premature? Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, remembering those terrifying months when the doctors weren't sure if the babies would survive, when she'd spent every available moment at the hospital while trying to work enough hours to keep their insurance active. Born at 32 weeks, 2 months in the NICU. Complications, surgeries, specialists. I lost my apartment, my car, everything I owned paying for their care. But they're healthy now, and that's all that matters. My God, Sarah, if I'd known... You would have what? Come running back? Chosen us over your trust fund? We both know that's not true, Marcus. Your family made their position very clear about what would happen if you stayed with me. Marcus stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. You don't understand. By the time I finally stood up to my father, by the time I realized what I'd thrown away, I couldn't find you. I hired private investigators. I spent years trying to track you down. When I finally found out where you were working, that you had children. He swallowed hard. I hoped, but I couldn't be sure. So I started helping, anonymously. I've been leaving food, paying bills you never knew about. You what? Sarah stared at him, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed suddenly clicking into place. The electric bill that got mysteriously paid last month, the grocery delivery I thought was a mistake, the medical bills that suddenly showed zero balances. I couldn't approach you directly. I was afraid you'd run again, take the children somewhere I'd never find you. I needed to know if Maya was. Marcus's voice broke completely. She has my mother's eyes, Sarah, my grandmother's stubborn chin. When Officer Mills described the call, when he said a 6-year-old named Maya with the birthday you gave me, Sarah felt her anger warring with something else, something dangerous that felt like hope trying to bloom in the wasteland of her heart. Why now, Marcus? Why after 7 years do you suddenly care about being a father? Because I never stopped loving you. The words came out in a rush as if he'd been holding them back for years. Because I've spent every single day regretting the choice I made. Because I want to be the man you deserved back then. The father my daughter deserves now. Your daughter? Sarah's voice was sharp. She's been my daughter for 6 years. I'm the one who stayed up all night when she had fever. I'm the one who taught her to read, who kissed her scraped knees, who worked double shifts to keep a roof over her head. You don't get to show up now and claim her just because you share DNA. I'm not trying to claim her. I'm trying to. I want to be part of her life. Part of your life. If you'll let me. Behind them, unnoticed by the adults lost in their painful reunion, Maya had crept back to the building's front window. She pressed her small face against the glass, watching the 3 adults talk with increasing intensity. She didn't understand all the words. Trust fund and inheritance were beyond her vocabulary. But she understood emotion. The Apple Man was crying. Her mommy was crying. Officer Brandon looked like he wished he were anywhere else in the world. And somehow, Maya's 6-year-old intuition told her it was all connected to her. The way the Apple Man had known her birthday, the way he'd said, our daughter, the way her mommy looked at him like she was seeing a ghost. Most telling of all, the way looking at him made Maya feel something she'd never experienced before. A sense of completion, as if a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. A 6-year-old's logical mind began putting pieces together with the straightforward reasoning that adults often abandoned in favor of complications. The stranger knew her birthday. He had said, our daughter. Her mommy was upset but not scared, and there was something in the way he looked at her that felt familiar, like coming home to a place she'd never been. Maya made a decision that would change everything. She pushed open the building door and ran back outside, her small feet pattering across the concrete as she moved directly to Marcus. She looked up at him with those dark eyes that mirrored his own, and asked the question that would shatter and rebuild 2 adult hearts. Are you my daddy? The question hit like lightning, striking the same place twice. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus dropped to his knees again, tears streaming down his face as 7 years of wondering and hoping and grieving crystallized into this one perfect, terrible, wonderful moment. I think so, sweetheart. I think I might be. Maya studied his face with the serious concentration she applied to all important matters. She looked at the tears on his cheeks, the way his hands shook as he reached toward her, the way her mother was crying but not telling her to go back inside. Then, with the simple wisdom of a child who had been unconsciously waiting her whole life for this moment, she threw her arms around his neck. I knew you'd come back, she whispered against his ear, her small voice filled with absolute certainty. I always knew my daddy would come back someday. And in that moment, with his daughter's arms around his neck and the woman he'd never stopped loving watching through tears, Marcus Thompson understood that he'd finally found his way home. The embrace lasted only seconds, but it contained years of longing, compressed into a single moment. When Maya finally pulled back, her small hands remained on Marcus's shoulders, studying his face with the fearless curiosity that had always defined her personality. You smell like my favorite soap, she announced matter-of-factly. The expensive kind they have at the fancy stores downtown. Mommy showed it to me once when we were looking for her work soap, but she said it costs more than our whole grocery budget. Marcus's heart clenched at the casual way Maya referenced their financial struggles. To her, expensive soap was simply a fact of life, something other people had that her family couldn't afford. There was no bitterness in her voice, just the practical acceptance of a child who had learned early that the world was divided into things they could have and things they couldn't. Maya. Sarah's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Come here, right now. But Maya didn't move. She continued studying Marcus's face as if memorizing every detail. Mommy, he has the same little scar by his eyebrow that I have. See? She pointed to a tiny white line near her left eyebrow, barely visible unless you knew where to look. I got mine when I fell off the swing at the park. How did you get yours? Marcus touched his own matching scar unconsciously. Hockey puck when I was 7. Emergency room, 6 stitches, and a lecture from my mother about being more careful. I got 4 stitches for mine. And Mommy held my hand the whole time and sang songs so I wouldn't be scared. Maya's eyes widened with the excitement of discovering a connection. We match. We have matching scars. Maya Chen, you come here this instant. Sarah's voice rose with panic, and something else. The fear of watching her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. For 6 years, she had been both mother and father to Maya. She had been everything her daughter needed, and now this man was threatening to disrupt the delicate balance they had achieved. But Maya was 6 years old, and 6-year-olds operate on emotion and instinct rather than adult fear and complications. Mommy, why are you mad? This is good. I found my daddy and he has matching scars and he smells nice and he knows about hockey pucks. Officer Brandon, who had been silently observing this family drama unfold, stepped forward. Perhaps we should take this conversation inside, away from curious neighbors. Indeed, several windows in the surrounding buildings had begun to show faces, residents drawn by the sound of raised voices and the spectacle of a clearly expensive car parked outside their modest building. Mrs. Patterson from 2C was practically hanging out her window, and Brandon could see at least 3 people pretending to check their mail while obviously eavesdropping. That's a good idea, Marcus said, standing slowly but keeping his eyes on Maya. Sarah, can we please talk? All of us? Sarah looked between Marcus and Maya, seeing the undeniable connection forming between them. Her daughter was practically glowing with happiness, and Sarah realized with growing dread that trying to separate them now would only hurt Maya. But letting Marcus into their lives terrified her more than any poverty they had faced. Fine. 20 minutes, then you leave and don't come back unless we decide otherwise. They climbed the narrow stairs to apartment 2B, Maya chattering the entire way about everything and nothing, the loose railing on the 2nd floor, the way the hallway echoed when you spoke loudly, the fact that Mrs. Rodriguez in 2A always cooked something that smelled like heaven, but they'd never been brave enough to ask what it was. Marcus took in every detail of their building with the sharp eye of someone who had spent years wondering where Sarah lived. The peeling paint on the walls, the industrial carpeting worn thin in places, the overhead lights that flickered unpredictably. But he also noticed the children's artwork taped to various doors, the community bulletin board covered with offers to babysit and share rides, the general sense that people here looked out for each other because they had to. Inside the apartment, the twins Zoe and Chloe were exactly where Maya had left them, sitting on the worn couch watching cartoons on a television that was clearly older than they were. They looked up when the adults entered, their 4-year-old faces showing polite curiosity about the strangers. Zoe, Chloe, this is Marcus, Sarah said carefully. He's someone Mommy knew a long time ago. Marcus knelt down to their level, understanding instinctively that sudden movements or loud voices might frighten them. Hello, girls. You can call me Marcus if you want. Zoe, always the bolder of the twins, tilted her head and studied him. Are you here about the apple? Maya said someone gave us an apple and it was the prettiest apple ever, but then she dropped it outside. I'm sorry about the apple getting dropped, Marcus said softly. Maybe next time I can bring more than one. Next time? Chloe whispered, speaking for the first time. She was clearly the shyer twin, often letting Zoe speak for both of them. Maya bounced on her toes with excitement. He's going to come back. He's my daddy, and daddies come back to visit their children. The word daddy hit the twins like a small explosion. They looked between Marcus and Sarah with wide eyes, trying to process this information. They had never had a father figure in their lives. Sarah had been everything to them. mother and father combined. Maya, we need to talk about this slowly, Sarah said, her voice strained with the effort of staying calm. Things are complicated. But they don't have to be. Maya interrupted, her 6-year-old logic cutting through adult complexities like a sword through silk. If he's my daddy, then he's family. And family takes care of each other. That's what you always tell us, Mommy. Marcus felt his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. His daughter was defending his right to be part of their family with the fierce loyalty that Sarah had clearly instilled in all 3 girls. Maya's right, Marcus said quietly, looking directly at Sarah. Family takes care of each other, and I want to take care of all of you, if you'll let me. Take care of us how? Sarah's voice was sharp with suspicion born from years of disappointment. With money? You think you can just write a check and suddenly become a father? No, I think becoming a father requires time and commitment, and earning the right to be trusted with their hearts. Marcus's voice was steady, but Brandon could see his hands trembling. I want to learn Maya's favorite bedtime story. I want to know what makes Zoe laugh and what helps Chloe feel brave. I want to be here for scraped knees and bad dreams, and school plays and birthday parties. Maya clapped her hands together. Oh, you could come to my school play. I'm going to be a tree in the forest, and I have to stand very still and wave my arms like branches. Do you want to come see me be a tree? More than anything in the world, Marcus said, and Sarah could hear the absolute sincerity in his voice. But Sarah's protective instincts were screaming warnings. This was too much, too fast. Maya was getting attached, building hopes and dreams around a man who had already abandoned them once. What happened when Marcus got bored with playing father? What happened when the novelty wore off and he remembered that raising children was hard work, not just fun moments and school plays? Marcus, we need to talk. Alone. Sarah looked at Brandon, who had been trying to blend into the background during this intensely personal moment. Officer Mills, thank you for your help, but I think we can handle this from here. Brandon nodded, understanding his dismissal, but he paused at the door and looked back at Marcus. Sir, I'll need you to call the station later. There are procedures we need to follow up on. After Brandon left, Sarah sent the girls to their shared bedroom to play, promising they could come out in a few minutes. When they were alone in the tiny living room, the years of hurt and anger and love and regret seemed to fill the space like a living thing. You can't just waltz back into our lives and expect everything to be perfect, Sarah said, her voice low but intense. Maya is 6 years old. She doesn't understand that people leave, that promises get broken, that sometimes loving someone isn't enough. I understand that, and I understand why you don't trust me. Marcus sat heavily on the edge of the couch, looking older than his 40 years. But Sarah, I've changed. Losing you, losing the chance to know Maya from the beginning, it broke something in me. My father died 3 years ago, and I realized that all the money in the world meant nothing if I didn't have a family to share it with. So you decided to find us, just like that? It wasn't just like that. It took me 2 years to find you after my father died. 2 years of private investigators and dead ends and wondering if you'd gotten married, if Maya had another father who was actually there for her. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. When I finally tracked you down to the nursing home, I couldn't just show up. What if you called security? What if you moved again? Sarah stared at him, pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. So you started the anonymous help, the paid bills. I wanted to make your life easier while I figured out how to approach you, but also. Marcus hesitated, then forged ahead. I wanted to take care of you, even if you never knew it was me, even if you never forgave me. You were struggling, and part of that was my fault. Part of it? Sarah's voice rose dangerously. Marcus, I was 24 years old and pregnant when you left. I had no family, no money, no support system. I lost my apartment, my car, everything I owned, paying for the twins' medical bills. I've worked double shifts for years just to keep us afloat. Part of it was your fault. All of it was my fault. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. All of it. I should have fought my father from the beginning. I should have chosen you over the money. I should have been there when Maya was born, when the twins were in the NICU, for every moment you had to face alone. Sarah felt tears threatening and she hated herself for it. She'd cried enough tears over Marcus Thompson to fill an ocean. She'd grieved the loss of their love, the loss of the future they'd planned together, the loss of the father Maya would never know. She'd made peace with being alone, with being enough for her 3 daughters. But now he was here, saying all the words she'd dreamed of hearing 7 years ago, and she didn't know if it was too late or if some part of her heart had been waiting for this moment all along. Actions matter more than words, Marcus. You left us once. How do I know you won't leave again when things get difficult? When Maya has a tantrum or gets sick, or when the reality of being a father becomes more complicated than school plays and bedtime stories. Because I've spent 7 years regretting the biggest mistake of my life. Because I know what it feels like to live without you, and I never want to feel that empty again. Marcus stood up, taking a step closer to her. Because I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack, and it terrified her. Love isn't enough, Marcus. It wasn't enough 7 years ago, and it might not be enough now. Then let me prove that it can be. Let me prove that I'm not the same man who walked away from you. Let me be the father Maya deserves and the partner you deserve. Before Sarah could respond, Maya's voice came from the bedroom doorway. Mommy, can we come out now? Zoe needs to use the bathroom, and Chloe wants to show Marcus her favorite book. Sarah looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Marcus's desperate expression, and realized that the choice might not be entirely hers to make. Maya had already claimed Marcus as her father, and the twins were looking at him with the same trusting curiosity they showed to all new people in their small world. Yes, you can come out, Sarah said finally, but we're going to take this very slowly, very carefully. Maya ran to Marcus and took his hand. Come see our room. We have bunk beds, and I sleep on top because I'm the oldest. And we have a bookshelf that Mommy made from old boxes, and it has all our favorite stories. As Maya led Marcus down the short hallway, chattering about everything they passed, Sarah followed behind with a heart full of hope and terror in equal measure. She was letting him back into their lives, into Maya's heart, into the carefully balanced world she'd built from nothing. She just prayed she wasn't making the biggest mistake of her life. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the break room at Sunset Manor, staring at her reflection in the scratched mirror above the coffee machine. She looked tired, more tired than usual, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was spiraling in directions she couldn't control. Marcus had been true to his word about taking things slowly. He'd called every day asking if he could visit, never pushing when Sarah said no, always accepting whatever small amount of time she was willing to give him with Maya. He'd attended Maya's school play, sitting in the back row and applauding so enthusiastically that Maya had waved at him from the stage, breaking character as a tree to beam with pride. But it was the small things that were breaking down Sarah's defenses. The way Marcus remembered that Chloe was afraid of loud noises and always spoke softly around her. The way he'd learned that Zoe collected bottle caps and had started bringing her interesting ones from his travels. The way he listened when Maya talked about her dreams of becoming a doctor like her mommy used to want to be. That last one had hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd forgotten that she'd once told Maya about her abandoned medical school dreams, about how she'd wanted to be a pediatric nurse before life had taken her in a different direction. She hadn't realized Maya remembered, much less that she'd shared that information with Marcus. Sarah, you okay, honey? Dolores, the evening shift supervisor, poked her head into the break room. You've been staring at that mirror for 5 minutes. I'm fine, just tired. Sarah forced a smile. Long day. Aren't they all? Dolores came into the room and poured herself coffee from the pot that always tasted like it had been made with dishwater. But you've seemed distracted lately. Everything okay at home with the girls? Sarah hesitated. Dolores had been like a mother figure to her for the past 3 years, and keeping the Marcus situation to herself was becoming increasingly difficult. Actually, something's come up. Maya's father contacted us. He wants to be part of her life. The father who's been missing for 6 years? 7. And he wasn't missing exactly. We had a falling out when I was pregnant, and he's been trying to find us for the past few years. Dolores raised an eyebrow. Trying to find you for years? Or trying to find you now that it's convenient? The question cut straight to the heart of Sarah's fears. I don't know, he says he's changed, that he wants to be a real father to Maya. And she? Sarah's voice trailed off. She likes him. She adores him. Dolores, you should see her face when he calls. She lights up like Christmas morning. She's never had a father figure in her life. And suddenly there's this man who shares her interests and makes her laugh and wants to hear about every detail of her day. And you're terrified he's going to break her heart. I'm terrified he's going to break all our hearts. Sarah sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs that served as break room furniture. What if this is just guilt? What if he gets bored? What if his family decides they don't want us around again? Dolores studied Sarah's face with the shrewd eyes of someone who had raised 4 children and buried 1 husband. What if he's genuinely changed? What if this is real? Are you going to let fear keep you from finding out? Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus, as if summoned by their conversation. Maya asked if I could take her to the Science Museum this weekend. Would that be okay? I know we're taking things slowly, but she's been talking about the dinosaur exhibit for 3 days straight. Sarah stared at the message, her finger hovering over the reply button. 3 weeks ago, the idea of letting Marcus take Maya anywhere alone would have been unthinkable. But he'd proven himself reliable, showing up when he said he would, respecting the boundaries Sarah had set, never making promises he couldn't keep. Saturday afternoon, okay? I work until 2. The response came back almost immediately. Perfect. I'll pick her up at 2:30. Thank you, Sarah. This means more than you know. That him? Dolores asked, reading Sarah's expression. He wants to take Maya to the Science Museum. And you're going to let him? Sarah looked at her phone, then at Dolores. I think I am. God help me, I think I'm actually going to let him. Saturday afternoon arrived with the kind of bright sunshine that made even their run-down neighborhood look almost cheerful. Sarah had spent the morning cleaning the apartment obsessively, trying to burn off nervous energy while Maya bounced around asking what time it was every 5 minutes. Is it 2:30 yet? How about now? Mommy, why do clocks move so slowly when you're waiting for something good? Because that's how time works when you're excited, Sarah said, folding the same towel for the 3rd time. Remember, you need to stay with Marcus the whole time. Don't wander off. Don't talk to strangers. Mommy, you already told me the rules 6 times. I promise I'll be good. Maya pressed her face against the window. Is that his car? It's so shiny. Marcus's BMW was indeed shiny, and Sarah felt a familiar pang of insecurity. His car probably cost more than she made in 2 years. It was a physical reminder of the gap between their worlds, the difference that had torn them apart 7 years ago. When Marcus knocked, Maya ran to the door so fast she nearly tripped over her own feet. He's here! He's here! Mommy, he's really here! Sarah opened the door to find Marcus looking almost as excited as Maya. He'd dressed casually, jeans and a sweater instead of his usual business attire, but even his casual clothes probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. Ready for some dinosaurs? He asked Maya, who responded by jumping up and down with pure joy. I've been ready since I woke up. Did you know that T-Rex teeth were 6 inches long? And that some dinosaurs were as big as school buses? And that paleontologists are people who study dinosaur bones and I might want to be one when I grow up? Marcus laughed, and Sarah was struck by how much younger he looked when he smiled. I did not know any of those things, but I'm very excited to learn more about dinosaurs from an expert. As they prepared to leave, Sarah found herself giving Maya one last hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo. Have fun, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too, Mommy. And Daddy, I love you too. The word Daddy still hit Sarah like a small earthquake every time Maya said it. But Marcus's face lit up like he'd just been given the greatest gift in the world. I love you too, Maya. More than all the dinosaurs in all the museums. After they left, Sarah found herself pacing the apartment like a caged animal. The twins were napping, the apartment was clean, and she had 3 hours to herself, a luxury she rarely experienced. But instead of enjoying the peace and quiet, she felt anxious and unsettled. What if something happened to Maya while she was with Marcus? What if his car broke down or Maya got scared? Or he realized that spending a whole afternoon with a chattering 6-year-old was more work than he'd bargained for. At 3:15, her phone rang. "Sarah, it's Marcus. Everything's fine," he said quickly, hearing the panic in her voice when she answered. "Maya wanted to call and tell you about the Triceratops we just saw." Mommy, you would not believe how big these dinosaurs are. And there's a real fossil that's millions and millions of years old. And Marcus says we can see the planetarium next, and they have a gift shop with books about dinosaurs." Sarah felt her shoulders relax at the sound of Maya's excitement. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Are you being good for Marcus?" "She's being perfect." Marcus's voice came back on the line. "Sarah, she's incredible. She's been reading all the exhibit signs to me and explaining everything she knows about each dinosaur. I had no idea she was so interested in science." "She gets that from you," Sarah said softly, remembering Marcus's passion for understanding how things worked, his need to research and question and discover. "Maybe, but she gets her kindness from you. She's been making sure I understand everything too, explaining words she thinks might be too big for me." Despite herself, Sarah smiled. That was pure Maya, always looking out for others, always making sure everyone was included. They returned home 3 hours later, Maya practically vibrating with excitement and carrying a bag from the museum gift shop. She launched into a detailed account of everything they'd seen, every fact she'd learned, every moment of wonder she'd experienced. "And Marcus bought me this book about dinosaurs and this little model of a stegosaurus, and he said next time we could go to the planetarium and learn about stars." Next time. The words hung in the air, and Sarah realized that somewhere during the afternoon, next time had stopped being a question and become an assumption. Marcus lingered after Maya ran off to show the twins her new treasures. "Thank you for trusting me with her," he said quietly. "Today was one of the best days I've had in years." "She had a good time?" "Sarah, she's amazing. She's curious and smart and funny and kind. She's everything I could have hoped for in a daughter." Marcus paused, then continued more quietly. "She asked me why I wasn't there when she was little." Sarah's heart stopped. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I made a mistake, a very big mistake, and that I was sorry, that I was trying to be better now." Marcus met Sarah's eyes. "She said mistakes are okay as long as you learn from them and try to fix them. She's very wise for 6. She gets that from you, too." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Sarah realized that something had shifted during the afternoon. The man standing in her living room wasn't the same person who had walked away 7 years ago. This Marcus was humble, patient, genuinely interested in Maya's thoughts and feelings. This Marcus had spent 3 hours listening to dinosaur facts with the attention of someone who understood that childhood wonder was sacred. "Marcus," Sarah said carefully, "Maya's been asking if you can come to dinner sometime. A real dinner here, with all of us." Marcus's face lit up with hope. "I would love that, more than anything. Sunday, nothing fancy, spaghetti and garlic bread, but it would mean a lot to her. It would mean everything to me." As Marcus left, Sarah watched from the window as he got into his expensive car and drove away from their modest neighborhood. But for the first time in 7 years, she wasn't thinking about the differences between their worlds. She was thinking about the way he'd listened to Maya with complete attention, the way he'd treated her daughter's excitement as the most important thing in the world. Maybe, just maybe, some people really could change. Sunday dinner became a weekly tradition. Then Wednesday dinners. Then Marcus started showing up on Saturday mornings with donuts and coffee, staying to help Maya with her reading homework, while the twins used him as a human jungle gym. 6 months after the apple incident, Sarah found herself standing in her kitchen, watching through the window as Marcus taught Maya how to throw a baseball in the small courtyard behind their building. His form was terrible. Clearly, baseball had not been part of his privileged upbringing, but Maya didn't care. She was glowing with pride every time she managed to catch one of his gentle tosses. "He's really trying, isn't he?" Dolores had stopped by with a casserole, as she did whenever she was worried about Sarah eating enough. "To be a good father, I mean." "He is." Sarah couldn't deny it anymore. Marcus had become a constant, reliable presence in their lives. He'd learned all their routines, remembered important dates, showed up for Maya's parent-teacher conference with the same intensity he probably brought to board meetings. And you're still fighting it tooth and nail. Sarah turned from the window to find Dolores watching her with knowing eyes. I'm being careful. Honey, there's careful, and then there's stubborn. You've been testing that man for 6 months, and he's passed every test you've thrown at him. At what point do you admit that maybe he's earned another chance? Before Sarah could answer, the apartment door burst open and Maya ran in, dirt-stained and breathless with excitement. Mommy, Mommy! Marcus caught my really hard throw, and he said I have a natural arm, and he thinks I might be good at softball. Can I play softball, please? He said he'd help me practice, but he'd help. Behind her, Marcus appeared in the doorway looking almost as excited as Maya. She really does have talent, Sarah. Her coordination is impressive for a 6-year-old. Sarah felt the familiar tug of war in her chest, joy at Maya's happiness warring with fear of getting too comfortable with Marcus's presence in their lives. We'll see about softball. It costs money for equipment and league fees. I could help with, Marcus started, then stopped himself. They'd had this conversation before. Sarah was determined to maintain their independence, to prove she could provide for her children without his financial help. We'll figure it out, Sarah said firmly. That evening, after Dolores left and the twins were in bed, Maya sat at the kitchen table working on a school project about families. She was supposed to draw a picture of her family and write a paragraph about what made them special. Sarah watched her daughter carefully drawing stick figures. A tall woman labeled Mommy, 3 smaller figures labeled Maya, Zoe, and Chloe, and then, after a moment's hesitation, another tall figure labeled Daddy. Maya, Sarah said carefully, your teacher might have questions about your family picture. Maya looked up from her drawing with serious eyes. What kind of questions? Well, some families look different from other families. Your daddy hasn't always lived with us. But he's part of our family now, right? Maya's voice was small, uncertain in a way that made Sarah's heart ache. He comes to dinner and helps with homework and taught me about dinosaurs. That's what daddies do. Sarah sat down next to her daughter, struggling with how to explain the complexities of their situation to a 6-year-old. Sweetheart, relationships between grown-ups are complicated. Just because someone spends time with us doesn't mean, do you love him? Maya interrupted with the direct honesty that children wielded like a weapon. The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. Maya, that's not something you need to worry about. But do you? Because he loves you, I can tell. And he loves me and Zoe and Chloe. And we love him. So why can't we all be a family? Sarah stared at her daughter's earnest face and realized she was out of arguments. The truth was, somewhere during the past 6 months, Marcus had become part of their daily life. The twins asked for him when he didn't come by. Maya saved up stories all week to tell him. And Sarah. Sarah had started looking forward to his visits with a warmth that terrified her. It's complicated, sweetheart. Everything's complicated when grown-ups make it complicated, Maya said with 6-year-old wisdom. But love isn't complicated. Love is easy. You just love someone and they love you back and you take care of each other. 2 days later, Sarah's carefully constructed world came crashing down. She was at work when the call came from Maya's school. Ms. Chen, this is Principal Rodriguez from Lincoln Elementary. Maya's been in an accident. The words hit Sarah like ice water. What kind of accident? Is she okay? She fell from the monkey bars during recess. She's conscious and alert, but she may have broken her arm. The ambulance is taking her to St. Mary's Hospital. Sarah's hand shook as she hung up the phone. She called her supervisor, grabbed her purse, and ran for the parking lot, her mind racing with terror and worst-case scenarios. Maya's medical insurance was basic at best. They couldn't afford major medical bills. What if her arm required surgery? What if there were complications? By the time she reached the hospital, Maya was already in the emergency room, her left arm in a temporary sling and tears streaming down her face. Mommy! Maya sobbed as Sarah rushed to her bedside. It hurts so much and the doctors want to take pictures of my bones and I'm scared. I'm here, baby. Mommy's here. Sarah gathered Maya carefully into her arms, her heart breaking at her daughter's pain. What happened? I was trying to do the monkey bars like the big kids and I fell. Mrs. Johnson said not to move my arm, and it really, really hurts. A doctor appeared at Sarah's elbow, young, efficient, with the kind of bedside manner that managed to be both professional and comforting. Ms. Chen, I'm Dr. Williams. Maya's going to need x-rays to determine if there's a fracture. The good news is that she's alert and responding well, and these kinds of injuries are very common in children her age. X-rays? Sarah's mind immediately went to costs. How much will that cost? And if it's broken, what then? Let's take it one step at a time. First we get the x-rays, then we'll know what we're dealing with. As they wheeled Maya away for imaging, Sarah sat in the waiting room and tried not to panic about money. Her insurance had a high deductible, and emergency room visits were expensive even for minor injuries. She was calculating costs in her head when her phone rang. Marcus. Sarah, Maya's school called me. I'm listed as an emergency contact. How is she? Sarah had forgotten that Marcus had insisted on being added to Maya's emergency contact list. At the time, it had seemed presumptuous. Now, hearing his voice, she felt some of the panic ease. Possible broken arm. We're waiting for x-ray results. I'm on my way. Marcus, you don't need to. Yes, I do. She's my daughter, Sarah. I'm coming. 15 minutes later, Marcus burst through the emergency room doors like a man on a mission. He spotted Sarah immediately and crossed the waiting room in 3 long strides. Where is she? How is she? Have you heard anything? Still getting x-rays. Marcus, you didn't have to come. I can handle this. Marcus sat down beside her, his face pale with worry. I know you can handle it. You've been handling everything alone for 6 years. But you don't have to anymore. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Williams appeared with a clipboard and a reassuring smile. Good news. It's a clean break in the radius, her forearm. Very straightforward. We'll put her in a cast and she should heal completely in 6 to 8 weeks. A cast? Sarah felt relief wash over her. A cast was manageable. A cast wouldn't bankrupt them. She'll need to see an orthopedic specialist in a week for follow-up, but this is exactly the kind of injury that heals beautifully in children. She'll be back to monkey bars before you know it. As Dr. Williams walked away, Sarah felt the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. Maya would be fine, but there would still be medical bills, specialist visits, potential time off work if Maya needed extra care. Sarah, Marcus said quietly, let me help with the medical costs. I can't let you do that. Why not? She's my daughter too. Because the moment I let you start paying for things, everything changes. I become dependent on you, and what happens when you decide this whole father thing is too much work? Marcus turned to face her fully, his eyes serious. What do I have to do to prove to you that I'm not going anywhere? I've been here every week for 6 months. I've never missed a dinner, never broken a promise, never given you any reason to think I'm not committed to this family. Because you haven't been tested yet. Sarah's voice rose, drawing looks from other people in the waiting room. This is the easy part, Marcus. Dinner and homework and trips to the museum. What about when Maya's sick at 3 a.m.? What about when the twins have tantrums in the grocery store? What about when I'm exhausted and cranky and not the woman you fell in love with 7 years ago? Then I'll be there at 3 a.m. I'll help with tantrums. And Sarah, you're exactly the woman I fell in love with 7 years ago. You're just stronger now, braver now, more amazing than I ever imagined you could be. Before Sarah could respond, a nurse appeared. You can see Maya now. She's asking for both her parents. Both her parents. The phrase hit Sarah like a revelation. Somewhere along the way, that's what they'd become. Maya's parents. Not Sarah and her daughter's father. Not a complicated arrangement between exes, but parents. Partners in the most important job either of them would ever have. They found Maya sitting up in bed, sporting a bright purple cast and a smile that could have powered the hospital. Look, it's purple. Dr. Williams said I could pick any color I wanted, and purple is my favorite. Maya held up her cast proudly. And she said people can sign it, and it will be like having autographs. How do you feel, sweetheart? Sarah asked, smoothing Maya's hair. It doesn't hurt much now, and the doctor said I'm very brave. Maya looked between her parents with satisfaction. I'm glad you're both here. It feels right when we're all together. Marcus reached for Sarah's hand, and for the first time in 6 months, she didn't pull away. Maya's right, he said quietly. It does feel right when we're all together. Later that evening, after Maya was settled at home with pain medication and strict instructions to take it easy, Sarah found herself standing on her small balcony, watching Marcus teach the twins how to play a gentle game of catch in the courtyard. Maya sat in a lawn chair like a tiny supervisor, calling out encouragement and instructions from her position of experience. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor at work. "How's Maya? Take tomorrow off if you need to. We'll cover your shift." Another text, this one from Dolores. "Heard about the accident. I made soup. Coming by tomorrow." A third text from Maya's teacher. "So sorry about Maya's fall. Let me know if she needs help with modified assignments." And then a fourth text, this one from Marcus. "Thank you for letting me be here today, for letting me be her father. I know I haven't earned it yet, but I'm going to spend every day trying to deserve the gift you've given me." Sarah looked at the messages, then at the scene below. Marcus, carefully lobbing the ball to 4-year-old Chloe, while Zoe cheered and Maya shouted instructions from her chair. She thought about the fear she'd felt racing to the hospital, the relief of not facing it alone, the way Marcus had appeared without being asked and stayed without being invited. She thought about Maya's drawing of their family, about 6 months of Sunday dinners and baseball lessons and bedtime stories. She thought about the way Marcus looked at her daughters, not just Maya but all 3 of them, like they were the most precious things in the world. And she thought about Maya's words. Love isn't complicated. You just love someone and they love you back and you take care of each other. Maybe her 6-year-old daughter was the wisest person Sarah knew. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same courtyard where Marcus had first learned to play catch with Maya, but now it was decorated with white lights and flowers. Maya, her cast long gone, stood beside Sarah in a new dress, holding hands with both twins who were barely containing their excitement. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked, appearing beside them in a suit that actually fit the occasion. Not too expensive, not too formal, just right for a small family ceremony in their neighborhood courtyard. "Are you?" Sarah asked, looking up at the man who had slowly, patiently, persistently proven that some people really could change. "I've been ready for 7 years," Marcus said, then knelt down to Maya's level. "What about you, sweetheart? Are you ready to make this official?" Maya threw her arms around his neck. "I've been ready since the day you came back, Daddy. I told you, I always knew you'd come home." As they walked toward the small group of friends and neighbors who had become their extended family, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Not because life would suddenly be easy, but because she no longer had to face it alone. Maya had been right about love. It wasn't complicated when you stopped making it complicated. You just loved someone, and they loved you back, and you took care of each other. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, love gave you second chances, and third chances, and all the chances you needed to get it right.